Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It is Vlogmas Day 12. Happy Sunday, everyone. Today we're going to finally be introduced to David. Yay! As a recap, we left off yesterday with God removing Saul as king over Israel. Saul his instructions were to go to the Amalekites, utterly destroy them, the king, the animals, everything. Saul decided he wanted to save Agag and some other animals, and Samuel had to come to him and tell him, like, that's not what you were supposed to do. So Samuel ended up killing Agag, and then he had to leave from where Saul was. And in the text, it says that he didn't see him until he died. Chapter 16 opens up with Samuel mourning Saul, and God is telling, like, look, you still mourning him, but I rejected him as king. So, get it together, right? And then he tells him, okay, now I need you to go to Jesse, which we found out, or which we connected in Matthew, that Jesse is David's father. So God tells Samuel to go to Jesse because the king is among them. Verse 5, I am come to sacrifice unto the Lord. Sanctify yourselves and come with me to the sacrifice. And he sanctified Jesse and his sons and called them to the sacrifice. 7, but the Lord said unto Samuel, look not on his countenance or on the height of his stature, because I have refused him. For the Lord seeth not as man seeth, for man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart. So he's telling him, like, it's not going to be obvious who the king is going to be. Just because he's big, that doesn't mean he's going to be the king. Just because he's strong, that doesn't mean he's going to be the king. So we're not just looking on the outward appearance. So Jesse brings Jesse brings 7 of his sons for Samuel to look at, and God is telling him, no, that's not it. He's not it. He's not it. And at the end, Samuel is like, okay, is this all of your sons? Verse 11, and he said, there remaineth yet the youngest, and behold, he keepeth the sheep. And Samuel said unto Jesse, send and fetch him, for we will not sit down till he cometh hither. 12, and he sent and brought him in. Now he was ruddy and withal of a beautiful countenance, and goodly to look to. And the Lord said, arise, anoint him, for is he. Remember, they made a point to say that Saul was goodly, and it says that the child that was with the sheep, who was David, he is goodly to look to. So I guess he was a nice looking young guy. 13, then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brethren, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon David from that day forward. So Samuel rose up and went to Ramah. When the Spirit of the Lord came upon David, the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul, and an evil spirit from the Lord troubled Saul. Saul's servants told him God sent an evil spirit to trouble him, but they told him that he needed to find someone that could play the harp that would make him supposedly make him feel better. Coincidentally enough, the person that supposedly could play the harp so beautifully ended up being David. So Saul sent for David to play the harp for him. Saul sends a message to Jesse, who is David's father, asking him, please allow him to stay. Then Saul makes David his armor bearer. And 23, and it came to pass when the evil spirit of God was upon Saul, that David took a harp and played with his hand. So Saul was refreshed and was well, and the evil spirit departed from him. However, David, let's not forget, the spirit of God is upon David, which is probably why the evil spirit left, right? Chapter 17, this is where Goliath is being introduced. The Philistines and Israel are still in battle. Goliath is a Philistine of Gath. The description of Goliath is he is 6 cubits and a span. When I tried to look that up, I couldn't get a consecutive number. So I saw that it was anywhere from 7 feet to 11 feet. Now I'm 5'6", so I'm just thinking of another me standing on top of my shoulders of how tall that is. It's not, I mean, it's tall, but it's not like really like excessively your head is in the clouds tall. But anyway, so it's the description is saying how heavy his armor is. He's wearing brass, and this is about a shekel of like I tell y'all, read everything. Then it's saying the Philistines are standing on one side and Israel is standing on another side. It says Goliath like goes out into like the valley between them and saying, hey, I'm a Philistine. You guys are servants of Saul, who are the Israelites. Who are you going to send to battle against me? That's where we are now in chapter 17. 17:9. If he be able to fight with me and to kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then ye shall be our servants. So if I beat y'all, y'all are our servants. If y'all beat us, we're your servants. 3 of Jesse's sons go to follow him into battle, follow Saul into battle. And then it says that David went back to tend to the sheep. Jesse gave bread and corn to David to take to his brothers and the others that were to go into battle. When David goes to deliver the food, he hears what Goliath is saying about, if we defeat you, you become our servants. If you defeat us, we become your servants. And everyone was scared. And it also says that they fled. So once Jesse gets there, he's asking them, okay, so what's going to happen? What happens? What do you get if you defeat the Philistine? And everyone's like, oh, well, have you seen him? He's huge. Like, what are you going to do? You're small. And his brothers are like, okay, well, why are you here? You asking all these questions. Why are you here? So Saul goes to David in 32. And David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of him. Thy servant will go and fight with this Philistine. So David is telling him, I'll go. And let's see. 33. And Saul said to David, thou art not able to go against this Philistine to fight, for thou art but a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. So he's telling him, you're too small, and you're young, so I don't want you to go to fight into battle. Go back to 25. I left this out. When David is asking the soldiers and his brothers, what do we get if we defeat the Philistine, who is David? And take a note, it says that in 25, it says, and it shall be that the man who killeth him, the king, will enrich him with great riches, and will give him his daughter, and make his father's house free of Israel. So they're saying that Saul will give whoever they would make him rich, he would give him one of his daughters. And then, of course, by you killing Goliath or the Philistine, then you will free us, the Israelites. In verses 34 and 35, David is telling Saul, look, one time a bear and a lion got into the stable with the sheep, and I killed the bear and the lion. So, what is a man? 37. David said, moreover, the Lord that delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said unto David, go, and the Lord be with thee. Then they tried to armor him, and they put all this heavy armor on David, which, like, they're describing him as like being younger, and they're trying to put the same heavy armor on him that the men wear, and he couldn't move. So he was like, you know what, 40. And he took his staff in his hand and chose him 5 smooth stones out of the brook and put them in a shepherd's bag, which he had even a scrip, and his sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine. So everybody knows, like, he took the slingshot and 5 smooth stones because the armor and everything else was too heavy. When David is approaching Goliath, Goliath is in disbelief, like, they sending this little boy out here. So he's like starting to like mock him. And 44, the Philistine said to David, come to me, and I will give thy flesh unto the fowls of the air and to the beasts of the field. So he's saying, like, okay, yeah, you so smart, I could throw you to a bird. Why you here? David comes with a historical clapback. And 45, David is like, okay, you're saying that I'm small and you could throw me to a bird, but yet you got a spear, a sword, and a shield. David tell him, he said, look, I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. I come with the name of God. 49. David put his hand in his bag and took thence the stone and slang it and smote the Philistine in his forehead, that the stone sunk into his forehead and he fell upon his face to the earth. So the stone had to be just like moving so fast that it was kind of like a bullet, I would guess, because if it sunk into his head. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and with a stone, and smote the Philistine and slew him, but there was no sword in the hand of David. However, just so everybody would know that it was real, David ran over to Goliath, took his sword, and cut his head off. And when the Philistines saw their champion was dead, they fled. When everyone hears that David slew the Philistine, who was Goliath, they start inquiring, like, okay, so who little boy is this? And 57, and as David returned from the slaughter of the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul with the head of the Philistine in his hand. And Saul said to him, whose son art thou, young man? And David answered, I am the son of thy servant Jesse the Bethlehemite. In chapter 18, it goes on to say how the people love David. David is such a good and wise person. And because they hype David up so much, Saul is very envious of this. And he knows that David has favor with God. So he as in Saul hatches like a plan to get David to marry his oldest daughter, but then she ends up marrying someone else. Then one of his daughters like really likes David, and he wants him to marry her. And David's cool with it, because he's like, okay, well, I will be the son-in-law of the king because I'm a poor man, so that's fine. It also says that David and Jonathan are really close, to the point that Jonathan, who was Saul's son, gave David like the clothes off of his back. So, in an effort to indirectly kill David, Saul before he gives his daughter's hand to David. He tells David, "Okay, this is what I want you to do. You need to go and get the foreskins of like some kind of irrational number, like 10,000 foreskins of the Philistines, and then after that you can marry my daughter." So he's thinking like it's a dummy mission, like he's not going to be able to achieve this. But David comes back with the foreskins of the whatever crazy number of Philistines, and then after that he gives his daughter's hand, Michal, to David. And at the end, it says that in verse 29, and Saul was yet more afraid of David, and Saul became David's enemy continually. Also, what I left out was in the scripture in chapter 18, it says that the evil spirit came back upon Saul. Remember that. So we're going to put a pin in it right there. We are in chapter 18. We're going to do a heavy recap tomorrow from before Samuel was born up until now. So make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Bye bye.